And because I'll probably be Hello lovelies, and welcome to the July 2024 episode of the Not Quite Enough Yarn podcast. My name's Lesley and this is a podcast about all the yarny stuff, knitting, crochet, spinning, if you name it, I'll have a go at it. And I record on the south coast of the UK. Thank you for being here, whether you're here for the first time or you've been here lots of times before. I am very grateful to you for spending your time with me, so thank you. It's the Not Quite Enough Yarn podcast, despite the, I like to call it a healthy stash, because I rarely buy enough of the same yarn to make an entire garment. So I didn't have quite enough yarn is my reason for adding in a stripe or a block or a different colour edging, or in some way having mixed yarns up. It's what I like to do. We have a make-along going on at the moment. This is the Modification MAL, and the idea is that you either design your own pattern, and you're more than welcome to do that, or you amend a pattern in some way to make it a better fit for you or for the person you're making it for. So it might be adding length to a sock or putting a different type of heel or toe in. It might be changing the sleeve length or shape on a sweater, or changing the length of the garment, changing the neck. It's a sweater pattern, you're making a cardigan, or vice versa. Anything that changes the pattern slightly. If it's a straight yarn substitution, so your gauge is the same and you're following exactly the same row and stitch count, you're just using a different yarn, that doesn't count, I'm afraid, because you're not actually modifying the pattern. But anything that is a change, you know, a roll neck instead of a short crew neck, something like that, you're more than welcome to join in. It's run on Ravelry, and I know Ravelry is still not for everyone, so if you're not using Ravelry, if you could email me the picture of your item and email that to notquiteenoughYarn@gmail.com, and I will add it to the thread. I do a draw every quarter, so we just had the June one, sorry you missed that, but there's still the September one to go. And there are two draws, one for a pattern prize, so if that's a post on the thread, sorry I was getting my words confusing, that's a post on the thread that doesn't have a picture with it, so please do join in the conversation, compliment someone's work, ask them a question, talk about their colour choices, share your experiences. Those are all eligible for a pattern prize, and if the post has a picture in it, then that is eligible for a physical prize, which is yarn usually. Oh, it may be something else, but it's usually yarn. It ran for all projects that were started on or after the 24th of December last year, 2023, and the make-along finishes at the end of September, and there'll be a prize for everything within that quarter and also a grand prize, so there'll be again a drawing for a pattern prize and a physical prize across all the entries that have taken part. So thank you to those who've been joining in already. Whether you have or you haven't, if you have a look at the thread, there's a lot of inspiration there, lots of people doing great work, and the modifications, some of them are quite subtle, some of them are quite major, but there's a lot of beautiful things in that thread, so thank you to everyone who's been taking part. I am going to start this month's podcast with, I'm not going to call it a fail, I'm going to call it a change of plan, because I haven't failed at it, I just haven't done it because I wasn't enjoying it, and that's the best reason to not do something. Not that there's anything wrong with the pattern is beautiful and I still really love the finished item, but I do know that I am not going to make it. With the best will in the world, I am not going to make it. So this is the Domino Star Stash Buster Afghan. and that is by Anita Gran, and it's a beautiful Afghan, but it doesn't suit the way that I craft, and this is a purely personal thing. Please don't take this as any reflection on the pattern, because it's well written, it's a great design. But I started this some months ago, and this is as far as I've got. Now, it was always going to be a slow project because it's a pick up and put down, but this is all I've done so far. So basically the pattern is for an Afghan, and I've made a placemat. Yeah. The problem is I am an impetuous child who wants everything done yesterday, and for me this is just not the right type of project. So I'm doing it in 4-ply or fingering weight yarns. I'm just going to have a quick look, see what the original pattern recommendation was. Yeah, also fingering 4-ply weight. And as you can see, without giving too much away, it's modular in design. So you start off with this central piece, and then you do these modified diamonds. I just know that if I were to carry on with this, and I would end up with a large piece, and I'm working on 2 little needles to do the next modular piece, I'm not going to have fun with that. It's just not going to happen. So for that reason, I have decided to change plan. I'm going to pull this out. I mean, I could leave it as a placemat, but I have no need of one, or not one in that design. But I do have a bag full of scraps and oddments of 4-ply fingering weight yarn, and that's not all of them. So I have decided to go down a different route, and I am blatantly copying an idea from another podcaster, this one being the fabulous and wonderful Chevy's of the Chevy Rail podcast, who has the same book as I do, and possibly many of you do as well. And that book is the 200 Crochet Blocks by Jan Eaton. For blankets, throws and Afghans. So there are 200 crochet blocks in here. Now, some of them are the same stitches, just in different colourways. And there are also some that are sort of crochet intarsia. I'm going to try and find a good example of that. So for example, we have this one, abstract. And the stitches are the same, it's just the colour choices that make it different. So where you have a lot of these, I'm probably not going to make those. So my choice will probably be nearer kind of 160 squares, or blocks rather, or 120 even. As long as I can make a rectangle or a square out of it, it'll do the job. But I will be making these. Now I realise this is still 4-ply weight yarn and making a blanket, but the method is different, because I'm not going to be sitting with a large, nearly complete blanket on my lap whilst I'm working on a little square. I'm going to be working on a load of little squares and then joining them together, probably sewing. I don't mind sewing stuff up, it's fine. So that's the plan. Again, long-term project, this is going to take a while, but I've done the first few. I haven't blocked any of them yet, although one of them is pinned out on my blocking board. But I have the first one. I should get the names of these. So the first is called Triangle Stripes, as you can see. The second is called Tiny Texture, and I need to spray this because I've pinned it but I haven't wet it yet. So and the third is called Square Target. The initial idea in the book is that the squares are made using a 4mm hook and double knitting weight yarn, and they all come to 6 inch in size. I'm using a 3.5mm hook and fingering weight 4-ply yarn. Now of course everyone's tension is different, so mine are also still coming to about 6 inches, particularly once I've put on this little border. So I'm doing that as I go. So I have a large cone of this very dark brown yarn, and I'm doing that as a border on each one, and that's what I'll use to join them together. Now this first one, the yarn was a little finer. It was more like a 3-ply weight or a light fingering. So I built it up to size by adding an extra row of the dark on 2 sides, so that my entire square is the same size. And obviously I'm going to block them all so that they match anyway, hopefully. So I've done these 3 so far, and I will keep going. It will be a very long-term project, again a sort of pick up and put down project, but I think I will be far more likely to do this than the modular knitting. I love modular knitting, but I just think for this particular project it wasn't going to work for me. So with this, I think I'm just going to, you know, every now and again, especially if I'm in the middle of a large garment project and I just fancy a bit of a sort of palette cleanser, one of these squares would be perfect. So that's the plan. That's what we're working on. That's the new idea. It may change again. That's fine. This is my hobby, so I can change my mind. It's okay. But like I say, long-term project. I do have some more 4-ply yarn to mix up with this bag. A lot of pastels in here, but with the odd pop of sort of stronger colour. So it'll be quite a scrappy looking blanket, but that's fine. It's hopefully a good use of the yarns. So there we go. I record the podcast throughout the month and then put it all together and post on the last weekend of the month. So I will record the next section when I have something to show you. Thanks everyone. Hello lovelies. I'm going to talk you through a spinning project, which is a bit different to ones I've done in the past. In the past I've usually taken brightly coloured braids and then split them in 2 or 3 pieces and spun them together. Spun them and then plied them together. This is a bit different. When I first got my wheel, I also ordered, and this was from World of Wool, their Breed Discovery Pack. Bless you. So that, as you can see, has 8 different breeds, or 8 different types of yarn. We've got 2 lots of merino, different thicknesses of fibre, Shetland, Blueface Leicester, Jacob, Devon, Swaledale and Herdwick. And you have 25 grams of each. So it's a nice opportunity to try different sheep breeds, to get a feel for how they spin, how you enjoy working with them. I have spun them all up, and I've made sort of one-word comments on them for my own reference, but I'll go on to that in a moment. Because I'm an idiot, no, I have my reasons, but this is not a wise thing to do. I have got them all on one bobbin. It looks like a beer barrel, doesn't it? Now there is a reason why I did that. What I want to do is use all of this. So what I've done is I split, they came in little kind of nuggets, sort of like combed top, I think that's what they were. So I split them down and I worked through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So what I'm going to do with this when it's had a day or two to rest is I'm going to put it onto my yarn cake winder, and then I'm going to ply it from the outside and the inside together so that we're going to have predominantly the same yarns. together. I'm also going to ply with a bit of colour, because obviously I've got to have a bit of colour. I've got my bobbin of ends, so the bits that are left over from other times that I've done a spin. So that will put a bit of colour in with these, but there will be a bit of overlap because I won't have split them exactly, I won't have spun them consistently, so you will have a bit of overlap from one bead to the next as I ply them, but you'll have predominantly the same beads together for a period of time with a bit of the coloured fibre as well. So that's the plan. And now the dog's joining in. I dare say someone's had the audacity to walk up the street. Just a noisy one. I have a book which you see a lot of spinners have, called the Fleece and Fibre Source Book by Deborah Robson and Carol Icarius. I hope I'm pronouncing one of those correctly. And as it says, it's a source book, so you look up the breed of sheep that you're interested in and it will tell you about the sheep, it will tell you about the fibre. It's also very well illustrated, so if I just find a nice... So this is the page on, for example, Rambouillet, which I don't have in this pack, but that doesn't matter. And you can see we've got fibre, washed and raw, we've got some spun fibre, we've got some unspun fibre, and also we have some little knitted samples and little woven samples. So from this book you can get a very good idea of how your yarn is going to behave, what your best way for handling it is, and all of that good stuff. If I were a sensible person, I would have gone to this first to look for tips on spinning. But I just wanted to go in without that extra guidance. I just wanted to go in and sort of find my own way through. So judge for myself how I found the fibre, how I found the spinning of it, what differences I had to make for the different fibres. So it's a very interesting exercise. Some of these I'm unlikely to want to spin again because they're quite rough, quite rustic. We know that I'm a bit of a princess and I prefer the softer yarns. But a very interesting exercise. I'm glad I bought this pack. Like I say, I got it some time ago, so it's been in the stash a little while. But an interesting exercise. So rest this for the next couple of days, then I'll cake it up and then I'll ply it and I'll show you the finished skeins, because if that's one single, then that plied together with another yarn is definitely more than a bobbin worth, because I'll probably be using my woolly winder to ply it. They have slightly less capacity on the bobbin, so I'll probably have 2 if not 3 bobbins worth of plied yarn to then put into skeins, but that's fine. I'm okay with that. So I'll let you know how I get on. Right, so here's the cake on the ball winder. It's got a bit of a funny shape, and we can see that the middle has started to come out. It was basically rising up on the central spindle here and taking some of this with it. So plying this is going to be a very slow, careful process, and we'll see how we go. Hello lovelies. I have finished the spin. I have dried the skein on the line today because we had a good weather for drying, and it is done. It's a chunky one, not in terms of thickness of yarn, just in terms of size of cake, but I am rather pleased with it. Now, my magnificent plan didn't quite work out, but I'm not unhappy about that because it's taken me in a slightly different direction, which is going to work all the better, I feel. So I had split each of the little 25 gram, I'm going to call them bumps even though they're not, in half. And if we call them 1 to 8, I spun 1 to 8 and then 8 to 1, so that the two ends of my long single matched, and so forth and so forth. I then caked it up on my cake winder to make basically a plying ball so that I could pull from both ends so that I would have the same fibres working together. I knew that there would be some overlap because the likelihood of me splitting them both to exactly the same weight and spinning them to exactly the same consistency would be, it's just not going to happen. But because I had so much on the bobbin, and what I should have done is done 2 bobbins and then split splice them together so that I could still have one huge thing when I was caking it up, but from a spinning point of view it would have been easier to spin, because by the time the bobbin was getting very full, the yarn wasn't pulling through in quite the same way, and so I ended up doing sort of thicker yarn, not as many meters or yards of it. So this meant when I came to ply it together, I ran out of one side much quicker than the other. I hope this is making sense. And basically by the time I got to the third different fibre, I don't think they were matching at all. I don't think there was any overlap. Which initially I thought, oh, that wasn't kind of what I wanted. But then it occurred to me that I have got a very interesting fade on here. And it also occurred to me that this will go very nicely into the Ranunculus that I am making out of hand-dyed yarn. So, although the plan went completely the shape of the pear, I think it's actually worked in my favour. So what fibres do we have in here? Well, the first one, right in the middle there, which is a brown colour, is Shetland. Now, I have made kind of 1-2 word comments on this, and I've also had a look at the Fleece and Fibre book that I showed you and added their comments as well. So my comment, toothy, straightforward. So it's fairly straightforward spin, but quite toothy, rustic. And the source book calls it smooth and easy. They're a fan of Shetland. So, yep. Second one was an undyed, and that was Devon. And I noticed it had a very long fibre or staple length, and that I found it very smooth. And the source book said 8 to 12 inch staple length and slippery. Smooth, slippery, depends on your point of view. The third was Hardwick, and my observation was various fibre lengths left lots behind. So this was one where bits of fibre were fluffing all over my desk and over my clothes. And the source book says keep a light touch so fibre types blend as well as possible. I'm quite pleased with how this is matching up at the moment. The next was an undyed merino 23 micron, and I just put very soft, and the source book says wants to be fine when it's spun and has a tendency to pill, but we know that merino yarn has a tendency to pill. This is not news. The next one, which is the very dark one in here, I've got some very dark, was Jacob, and my word was rough. And the source book spoke a lot about the different colours within a Jacob sheep, so was kind of talking about that rather than the consistency on the bit that I read. I mean, then we had some more grey, which was a Swaledale, and I wrote rustic, and the source book said mixed fibres will separate out when spinning, and again it was one of those that left bits everywhere, and it said it used the shortest fibres as a guide to the amount of twist. So there we go. My second to last one was BFL, and I didn't make any notes on that, but I think I've reached the conclusion that BFL is probably, I would say, my favourite. I think it has that right balance between softness and not pilling that appeals to me from a knitting and wearing point of view. If you want super soft, and I'll show you some super soft in a minute, merino, super soft, but the BFL kind of felt nice. It was a good consistency to spin, and I liked the spingle that came out of it. And the book says loosen the top before spinning to avoid clumping. Well, I don't think I clumped, so that's good. And then my last one was merino again, 18.5 micron, and my comment, even softer but shorter fibre length. The book had said about the tendency to pill. Right, so this is my cake of yarn. Now you will notice it has colours beyond the natural colours of the fibre. Either that or we have some very strange sheep in the UK, which is possibly true. I plied this, so I had the 2 strands of the yarn from the breed pack, and I plied them with my leftover ends. So this is the bobbin that I have, where when I've spun yarn and plied the fibres together, there's usually some bits left over, and I put them all on one bobbin, and that's all now in here. So I have quite a squishy cake of yarn. This is 342 meters, 285 grams, and of the bit I measured, which was some of this on the outside, which would be one of the merinos, I was getting about 12 wraps per inch, but that will be variable. And because of the nature of the fibres, some of them spun more evenly than others, and I'm a human, so therefore inconsistent, so I will have drafted them differently and spun them differently depending on which day it was, you know, and there are so many variables in this. But an interesting exercise, which I'm glad I've done. It has also made me think about when I want to try different types of spinning, so longer draw and all that sort of thing. I will use the source book to look at fibre lengths and see what it recommends for different styles of spinning. I tend to be a short draw kind of inchworm type spinner, so all of these are fine for that. But when I want to try something different, then a fibre with a longer staple length is going to work for that. It also made me think about the fibres that I don't particularly want to spin again. Not because I disliked the yarn that I got from them, but just I know I probably wouldn't wear an entire garment of that fibre. And it's no news, I want all my fibres to be soft and squishy. So anything that's really rustic, toothy, scratchy, it's not for me. So there we go. But you will next see this knitted up into the Ranunculus, and I look forward to seeing how it knits up and how if the fade works the way I hope it will, with moving from one fibre type to another. We've also got the colours in here as well, which will make a difference, because I mean this looks predominantly yellow because there's one strand of yellow in amongst 2 strands of the natural fibres. This very dark happened to have some purple because that was what came off the bobbin at that time. So it will be quite a mixture of colours, and I'm looking forward to knitting it. I think it's going to be one of these things where I'm keen to get on to the next colour or the next change, because either the natural fibre will have changed or the dyed single will have changed. So I'm thinking I'll probably get the Ranunculus done pretty quickly. I have just split for the sleeves, so hopefully that will move ahead at a good pace. So. Now, I did say if you want super soft fibres, and yesterday as I was soaking this, I started spinning my next braid, and this is from Coral Rose Fibre Arts. Now, I was very kindly given to a couple of braids and some other bits and pieces, and oh my goodness, they are so soft and such pretty colours. I mean, come on, look at these. I mean, these two is kind of me in a sweater, isn't it? I mean, that would just be fabulous. This glorious pink, there's just a lot of delight to be had. And it's a superwash merino, which is, it's like spinning a cloud. So I'm enjoying this process. It's a different process to the one I had before, but I am enjoying it. I haven't kind of managed the yarn, don't know why I did the finger thing there, in terms of the colours. The braids, Coral did this in a way which is really quite clever, because you then have a lot of choices as to how you do this, because a lot of braids that you get, it'll be colour 1, colour 2, colour 3, colour 4, and then splodged throughout in sort of fairly uniform blocks of colour. Whereas this, when you undid the braid, and I should have taken a photograph and I'm sorry I didn't, it kind of moves from one set of colours to the next, which means you can do your own kind of gradient. You can do whatever you like. I am going to make this completely random. I split it into 3, just not down the length, just across the, pulled the braid apart, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing how these colours all play together in different configurations depending on how they're spun and how they're plied. So this is a very different spin to the one I've just done. Interesting in a different way, and very, very soft. That will be, unless I finish this braid this month, that will be all the spinning content, because I know that not everyone spins and not everyone's interested, but I found that a very interesting exercise, and hopefully you'll see it knitted up pretty soon. Cheers. Hello lovelies. I've used up all that handspun, and I have finished my Ranunculus sweater, which I've got the wrong way round. I do a little bit of Swiss darning, duplicate stitch at the back to show that it's the back. So here is my Ranunculus. I'll put a picture here of me wearing it. And you can see it's come up quite oversized, even for a Ranunculus, which is a fairly loose-fitting sweater anyway. The gauge went completely out because of using my handspun, which is not a consistent yarn, especially not when we're dealing with yarns spun over different periods of time. But I'm fine with that. It's big, it's baggy, it's cosy, we're all good. So this is the Ranunculus by Midori Hirose. I hope I'm pronouncing both of those names right. And third one of these I've made, first one in handspun. Used a 6mm needle. And to talk about the yarns, the bit at the top here, which is very soft, is some alpaca with loose ends from my bobbin amends. Then we've got Countess Ablaze, and I'm going to put in a close-up of this because this was the one where I was spinning mud, because it all went very, it lost its definition, but actually some of the colours are showing up nicely on the stitches, so not as bad as it seems. None of this has been blocked yet, so that's my excuse for why the stitches look uneven. Then we had some more alpaca with ends. That's, no, where's that? No, I'm not sure where that is. The World of Wool pack that you've been seeing up to this point. That went into the sleeves. So they don't quite match, but they're kind of nothing like. And then into the body, so from here down. And then the red colour is from Flannel Cakes. So that is all of the yarns, along with that commercial yarn, that Woolly Knit Warth Mill DK. My total meterage came out at just under 900 metres. And modifications, because of course I made some. So, as I said, very oversized, that's fine, don't care. I left out the lace and texture at the top. Given the number of colours I had in here and the texture of the yarn, I thought that it was not really worthwhile putting those texture and lace pieces in. So that's just plain stocking stitch all the way down. The sleeves, I tapered them rather than having them as one and then gathered in at the end. They were still a bit baggy, so I actually put a decrease in the cuff ribbing as well. And I'm not sure how the length compares to the original pattern, because I just made it to the length that I wanted. And the same goes for the body, which I just made to a length that matched other jumpers that I've made that I like wearing. So that's that. It looks as if the body is really short because it's come out at quite a deep raglan, but the overall body length, and I recorded that from the side of the neck down and then made it match other sweaters that I've got that I like. So I'm pretty pleased with it. I have entered it into Benta's Fluff to Stuff MAL. This is Benta of the Epilogue Lady, who has the Fluff to Stuff MAL, encouraging people to use the yarn that they spin. And I was happy to be encouraged. I've been working pretty monogamously on this. It just was drawing me to do that. I think I'm in a monogamous phase at the moment. I would be if I could say it. Because I've gone on to my next project and I'm working pretty consistently on that. But I think what helped with this, especially once I got on to using the breed pack, it was just looking to see what happened next in terms of the wool colours, but also the ends that I had in with them. So we can see on this sleeve here we've got some greens going into blues, going into purples, before I did the cuff in the different yarns. So I've heard people who do self-striping socks say the same thing, you just want to see the next colour. So that's what I've been doing. So this is a very heavy but very cosy sweater, which I shall look forward to wearing come the cooler months, although it is quite chilly today actually. Very strange weather. It's been very overcast but quite warm and sort of muggy, humid, sticky warm. And now it feels quite chilly, so I don't know what's going on, but I'm not a meteorologist, so I'm not going to. Anyway, my lovelies, that is the Ranunculus. Pretty much a one project podcast this month, but I will show you the next thing that I'm working on in my final section when I'll do a bit of a life update. Thanks ever so much. Cheers. Hello lovelies, just 2 or 3 more of the crochet squares, just a couple actually, and interesting how the sizing went on these two, because this first one I had to go around 2 edges to make it bigger. This one I had to unpick and redo smaller. So I'm finding it interesting how different stitches and different yarns are creating markedly different tensions, given that it's the same hook size and in theory the same weight of yarn, but obviously very different constructions for these two. So just something to kind of be aware of. So I've got a few of these now, and I'm just going to plod on with them. I think in my head my plan is to do a blanket of 12 by 12 squares. Given that they're coming out at just under 6 inches, that'll be just under 6 foot a square blanket, I think. It might alter slightly from that plan, but that's the kind of goal at the moment. But I'm enjoying making them. It's a useful exercise. I don't normally do like popcorn stitches or bobble stitches in crochet, so to be guided into them by following those patterns is quite good, and it makes me sort of think about different stitches and what I could use them for. So enjoying that. Cheers. Hello lovelies. Time for a bit of a life update. Before I do that, I'll show you what I'm working on. I have long been interested in the concept of the pie shawl, which is an Elizabeth Zimmerman idea, invention probably, as it's hers. And it's a way of constructing a circular or a semicircular shawl using a very simple method of when you increase the number of rows, when you increase the number of stitches. Because I'm me and I get bored easily, I thought I wanted to make one from the bottom up, so starting with the longest edge. And this is what I've been working on since finishing the Ranunculus. So looking at it, I mean, it'll block out, but it's not going to be the biggest of shawls, but it will be big enough, I think, because there's quite a bit in here. So I started off with an edge, which I worked side to side. I will go through all the details when I've finished it. The edge is actually taken from another shawl called Maluka, can't remember the designer, and it's a shawl I've made some time ago. So we've got that bit, and then I picked up the stitches and just carried on knitting. And my idea is to make this a bit like a sunset, so I've got a lighter yellow for the top, I've got this yellow and red mix for the middle, and red for the bottom. So I shall carry on working with this, on this as I speak. And now I've done the edge, which I think is kind of the longest bit, I'm fairly confident about getting it done at a reasonable pace, so it may even be that you see it next month. But there's a lot to happen between now and then. So life update, which I don't normally do because I normally do the weekly vlogs. But if you have watched the weekly vlogs and you saw yesterday's, you will know that I've said that that's not going to be happening for at least August and possibly longer because of some medical stuff. So this life update will take into account a lot of, we'll be discussing a certain amount of medical stuff, and I appreciate that may not be for you, so if that's the case, thank you for what you've watched and have a good month, take care, and I'll see you hopefully at the end of August. Right, have they gone? Let's talk about them. So, yes, so I have got to have some medical procedures. I'll try and keep this not too long. You may remember that around Easter time I was unwell, had a lot of discomfort, and yeah, just was really rough all over the long weekend for Easter. Called the NHS phone service 111, and they suggested, given my symptoms, that I go to the local hospital, which I did. Saw a doctor there who couldn't really do much for me at that time because symptoms had moved on by the time, you know, it's like you go to see a doctor, you feel better, you know, it's like that. But he suggested that I contact my GP and asked to be referred for an ultrasound, which I was, and I had. And at the time they said, oh, that's all fine. So I took that to mean, oh, that's all fine. Actually, what they meant was, we've been able to get the results that we need. So, much as I completely understand why would it be a radiographer doing the ultrasound? I guess so. Didn't then go into details of what she could see whilst doing the examination, I came away thinking, oh, that's all right then, and it wasn't quite the case. Now, it turned out, and there's so much information, if you have the NHS app on your phone, there's so much information that comes through, and you see the correspondence between the specialists and the general practice, and so you get to see a lot of information. It said that the ultrasound found some stuff, but was suboptimal due to fat cells, because this is the body I have, so we work with that, and also bowel gas. Now, if she'd said I'd have tried to get rid of it, she only had to mention it, and I would have given it a go. But I digress. So what transpired is the ultrasound identified an ovarian cyst. A biggish one. It's about 6 inches by 4 inches by something else. It did give the measurements in millimetres, I can't remember what they were, and also the capacity, which, from what they've said, is about the equivalent of 4 cans of cola, or 4 cans of soda. So, yeah, it's sizable. The GP, on the strength of those results, also suggested that I have a blood test done. And I've got a dropped stitch here, so I shall find a crochet hook to fix that while I'm talking. Because there are various markers, back to the blood test, there are various markers which can be useful in diagnosis. And one of them is, it's not a diagnostic tool for ovarian cancer, but it is closely correlated. And the number should be under 35. And mine is over 2,500. I like to exceed. So that has then driven the speed with which I've been looked at, scanned, and goodness knows what else. So had an appointment with a gynaecologist. I was then referred for an MRI. No, sorry, I had a CT scan after the ultrasound. You get confused, don't you? The gynaecologist referred me to an MRI because each scan gives more information. And after the MRI was taken, I then had a call from a very nice lady who's told me she is my specialist nurse. So you know things are getting a bit more serious when you have a specialist nurse. I also think specialist is a very odd way to spell cancer, because that's what we're talking about, potentially. That's why it's moving at speed and that sort of thing. So I can understand why things are slightly treated with euphemism, but I'm not sure how helpful that is. But I'm from a family of nurses. I deal with loss and death and those aspects of the end of life all the time, so I'm probably a little more hardened than others might be. So basically the MRI had been looked at by one of the county specialists, and I then had an appointment with them, and the decision is surgery, whip it all out. They're going to do a procedure called a frozen section, and this is so clever. I mean, those of you who have gone through this yourselves, or you know people that have been through cancer treatment, this won't be news to you, but it's the first time I'd come across it, and I just think it's so clever. So whilst I'm having surgery, before I'm stitched back up again, after they've whipped it all out, they then do, the frozen section is a kind of, it's a type of biopsy. It's not as accurate as a full biopsy, but it's, oh, that's my phone, do excuse me. But it is a procedure where they can have a look, and it's a bit sort of broader brushstroke, but they can say yes it is cancer or no it's not, and that can then dictate what happens with the surgery before I'm stitched up. So, you know, it potentially saves you from a second procedure, which is always a good thing. Whilst that's happening, they're also going to have a bit of a rummage around. Someone laughed when I said that to them, but yeah, so they're going to have a look around and just see if there's anything obvious that needs whipping out. So that's happening next week. I am a little bit terrified. I have confidence in the staff that I've met the consultant. The nurse is lovely and very calm, very practical, but very kind, and that's what you want, isn't it? You know, when I met the consultant, he said, right, we've got this to deal with. I said, do you mind if I call it Farage, which is the name of a politician? And he said, yeah, you can call it what you... Oh, yeah, that needs to come out, doesn't it? I said, yes, it certainly does. So, so that's what's happening imminently. I will have the surgery next week, and then we'll go from there. I'm due to be in hospital for a few days, and then home. It's 6 weeks before I can drive, but that's fairly standard with the general anaesthetic, I think. So it'll be a time of recovery at home. I will, of course, rest because that's the important part, but it is also important that I kind of keep moving, take things steady, but don't just kind of lay on the sofa and stay there, because post-op they're worried about chest infections, clotting, thromboses, that kind of thing. So the recovery is going to feel, in the middle of it, it'll feel like a long haul. But if we get a chance to recover, that's a very good thing. So that's where we're at the moment. It could be that once they've removed all the cysts and all the things they want and do the full biopsy, they find it wasn't cancer at all. In which case, fab. Obviously the size of it needs to be removed, but if it's not cancerous, then that's great. And that will be kind of the end of treatment, recover from the surgery and back to normal. If it does turn out that there are sort of nasties in there, then we cross that bridge as we come to it, and the options are there for chemotherapy, radiotherapy, whatever is needed to most appropriately treat whatever is there. So it's a little bit scary. It kind of makes sense, you know, the fatigue. My napping ability has always been strong. I was saying to a friend the other day, if napping was an Olympic sport, I'd be in Paris right now, because I could represent the country for that. But the level of fatigue I've been feeling kind of makes sense, because I'm carrying around this thing that shouldn't be there. Having looked at the MRI scan, because he showed it on his computer screen, it was kind of side on, and you see how big this thing is, and I just thought, wow, when that comes out, I'll have a washboard. I'm going to have a flat stomach. I won't. But it's a nice thought. Actually, it makes not the slightest difference, but you know, it's a fun thought. So my plan is to take the 6 weeks off because I have to. My job requires me to drive. I have to go and visit families, I have to get to ceremonies. Himself is not a keen enough driver to want to be my chauffeur and sit waiting in the car whilst I'm visiting families or whatever. So I'm not going to be working for a few weeks. I will be resting, I will be sleeping when I need to, but also I hope to be crafting. So there's always plenty to be getting on with. So if I am awake long enough, I will be getting stuff done. And if I'm not, then I won't. And I've just got to be a patient and just treat myself with the same kindness that I would treat anyone else, and follow the guidance from the medical professionals. And, you know, if there's physio type exercises to do those. If there's recommendations for going out for a walk or pottering around, then I will do those things as much as I can. And we'll see how we go. So I'm sorry, it's a bit of a buzzkill. Normally here for silly voices and faces, and this is a little more serious, so sorry for that. But life is real, and so far this has been the year that's just kept on giving. But scary as this is, I know that there are people in a much worse situation that are facing much tougher diagnoses, fewer hopes of treatment. Cancer is not uncommon in my family, but nor is recovery. So we have a pretty good hit rate on getting better. So that's the kind of thought process I'm trying to go through. So there won't be any weekly vlogs, and I realise the biggest problem for that, for people who watch the weekly vlogs, is that there will be less Heidi footage. But I will try and remember to record her and put her in next month's podcast. Podcast? That was a bad pun. An unintentional bad pun. Yeah. So we're going on an adventure and seeing where it takes us. Might take us to a cul-de-sac of it's all fine, get back to work, you lazy thing. In which case, yep, that's what I'll do. And we'll just deal with whatever we have to deal with as it comes along. I am by nature a worrier. So, you know, there are times when I'm getting all kind of in a state in my head, but mostly able to keep relatively calm, and where I can finding the funny side, because what else can you do really? So my lovelies, sorry that's all a bit doer, but hopefully this is the worst we'll have to face. I'll have to face, well, we obviously, and next time I speak to you it'll be, you know, I'm recovering well and this is the answer. So we shall see. I hope that you are all well. I hope that you're all being treated kindly by life. I know that people go through all sorts of difficult situations, and I know that there are some folks that I kind of follow online that are going through tough times at the moment. So if any of you are watching this, you have my love. I wish you strength and whatever you need. I'm not going to say I wish you not to have grief or not to feel sadness, because feelings are important and they are a sign of how much we care. So I wish you whatever you need to feel, to have the power and the value of those feelings, and also to come through them with support and people around you and sending good vibes out to the universe. I feel like I've whittled on for far too long. I can't see terribly well to see. Oh my goodness, this bit's nearly 20 minutes now. Time to stop. But just want to wish everyone well. Thank you to all for your support as always. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all your comments and thoughts. I love to hear from you. And I will see you the end of next month. Take care everyone. Thanks ever so much. Bye bye.